Okay, chapter 2, day 1. This chapter is going to start out with stuff that you had when you did Algebra 1. Actually, most of the chapter will be from Algebra 1. There'll be a couple new pieces, so this is going to be a lot of recap and review, which is fine. But we start out with two things that we're going to look at here in day 1. First focus is what makes a fraction undefined. Like if I have a fraction and I were to punch the information on my calculator and hit enter, sometimes I'll get an answer message. Sometimes I'll get a numerical, sometimes it might be a whole number, decimal, but sometimes I get an error message saying undefined, divide by 0 error. And so what we're going to take a look at is what makes it undefined. And so for example, a question on your test might say, what values of x makes this expression 3 over 2x undefined? And here's the key piece that you have to keep in mind. A 0 in the denominator, so in the bottom, makes it undefined. And so whatever we put in for x that causes the bottom to be 0, those values of x are what makes it undefined. Now, what do? Well, the first thing we have to do is set the denominator equal to 0 and solve for x. So we set the denominator, we take this piece right here, okay? And we take 2x and we set it equal to 0. I don't care what's on the top, I just care what's on the bottom and what values of x make this whole thing equal to 0. Because that's what will make the fraction undefined. So now, set the denominator equal to 0, did it, solve for x. Well, I just divide by 2, and x is 0. So, the question said, what values of x make that undefined? When x is 0, it's undefined. Because 0 times anything is 0. Let's take a look at another example. Okay, in this one, this is pretty fancy up top. X squared plus 3 pi x minus sine cosine plus tangent. Who cares? Because if it is what makes the fraction undefined, if that's the directions, then I don't care what's on the top. I take this and I set this equal to 0. I don't care what's on the top. Subtract 7 from both sides. X equals -7. There. That's what makes that fraction undefined when x is -7. So in general, we don't care what's on the top. It could be anything. Smile face. I don't care what it is. What makes this undefined is when this at the bottom is equal to 0. So how do we solve it? Well, I take this, I'm going to bring it over here, x squared minus 5x minus 6. I set this equal to 0. Why? Because when a 0 is in the bottom of a fraction, the fraction is undefined. It's just a rule in mathematics. Well, this looks like now chapter 1. I know how to do this. I can factor it. Factors of 6 with a difference of 5. Okay, needs to be a -5. Make my t when x is 6 and when x is -1. So if I put a 6 in here, 6 squared is 36, minus 6 times 5 is 30, so that's 6. 6 minus 6 is 0. Yep, made it undefined. Let's try -1. A -1 squared is a 1, and minus a 5 times a -1 would be a +5, and 1 plus 5 is 6, minus 6 is 0. Yeah. When these two values occur, then this fraction is undefined. So that's the first part, okay? The second part, I know you've done a lot of work in Algebra 1, also in your middle school years, is just simplifying. So the second thing we're going to focus on this first day is how do we simplify rational expressions? Rational. Anything that's in the form of a fraction or can be written in the form of a fraction is a rational piece. Expression does not have an equal sign. All right, it's just a bunch of x's and letters and y's and numbers. Okay, rational, so it looks like a fraction and there's no equal sign. And lo and behold, here's a fraction with no equal sign. And the directions usually just say simplify. Well, to simplify this, any fraction, factor if possible. So if we can take out a GCF, if it's a difference of two perfect squares, if it's a trinomial where we have two parentheses, or AC method, something like that, factor if possible. After you factor, we reduce the fraction, okay? So I look up here, there's no factoring involved because there's no plus or minus i's between terms. It's just one term on the top, one term on the bottom. So now we reduce. I reduce numbers with numbers. So 3 and 18, 3 can go into 3 once, 3 can go into 18 6 times. X squared and x cubed. Now, if I have the same letter, different powers, I can take away how many the small power is away from the large power. And so x squared is the smaller one. I cross that off fully. I take 2 away from the 3, leaving me 1. Okay? Let's take a look at that over here. So x cubed is really x times x times x. X squared is really x times x. I can take away 1 for 1, leaving me just x left, x to the first power. So how many ever this is, the smaller one, you can reduce the larger number by that figure. So here we are, y to the 9th and y to the 7th. The smaller one is the 7, full cross off. Take 7 away from 9, leaves you y squared. Z to the 4th, z to the, well, it's implied a 1 here if I don't see any number. So, full cross off, take 1 away from 4, leaves me 3. Okay, now I write what we have left. What we have left is, let's say I have a 1, x to the 1st. Well, if this is the only thing I had up here was this 1, I'd have to write it. Since I have other stuff, I don't really have to write the 1. So I have x to the 1st, and that's it. Because this was crossed off, this was crossed off. On the bottom I have a 6, and then this is gone, y squared, z to the 3rd. And that would be the answer. Okay, I don't quite like how that came out right there. There we go. Okay. Factor if possible, then reduce. If this would have gotten crossed off fully, this 1 that I had left would still need to be on the top. If I cross off everything on the top, I still have a 1 there to hold place. Okay? Last one, simplify. Okay? Factor if possible. Well, let's see what we got here. I have 2 terms, so I know it's not a trinomial with 2 sets of parentheses. These are not perfect squares. Maybe there's a greatest common factor. Oh yeah, I could take out a 2 and an x. So I take out a 2x. What do I have left? I have an x minus 4. All right? Over. This is factorable. Trinomial. I don't have to do AC method because this is a 1 here. I can just think of factors of 20 that differ by 1. That's 5 and 4. X and x, and I need it to be positive 1. So it's a positive 5, a minus on the 4. Now, step 2, reduce. I look for numbers on the top, numbers on the bottom. Okay? There's a 2 on top outside the parentheses. There's no number out here outside the parentheses, so I cannot reduce it with anything. I can't reduce it with the 4 because this is paired up inside the parenthesis. All right? So look, x minus 4, here's an identical match. I can reduce those. I can't reduce this x with this because this is paired up inside a parenthesis, this is outside a parenthesis. Can't reduce things inside with things outside. So I'm done. So this is 2x over x plus 5. And that is my answer. And so again, day one deals with what makes a fraction undefined, and then how do we simplify, factor, and reduce. Factor if possible. Okay?